The aim of this workshop is twofold. First, we would like to inform you about the process and the next steps on the way to a global science policy interface on chemicals and waste. And the second objective is that we want to respond to questions that you may have so that you can support the process in your own country based on our discussion today and the information we can share with you. Our sign-on campaign that we started in the spring this year has shown very strong support for the idea of a global science policy interface body on chemicals, waste, and pollution. Actually, we were really overwhelmed and very much impressed by the many signatures and all the positive reactions to the sign-on campaign. As you may have seen, it's more than 1,850 signatures from more than 80 countries that have come in. And that is really a very strong sign. So we can say from the scientific side, we have given the world a signal that we are ready for this step and for this move to establish such a body. And now it is important or even essential that the governments of the world do their part, because of obviously without the policy side, a science policy interface will not be able to work. The agenda for the workshop today is that after my brief introduction now, my colleague and IPCP board member, Janwin Wang, will provide you with some background of the process, where we are in the process toward that global science policy interface body. And then there will be a Q&A session led by Miriam Diamond, also a member of the board of the IPCP and vice chair of the IPCP. And that is mostly what we want to do. But then, of course, after the webinar, there is an important additional step that ideally then, given or provided with information we can share with you today, you may want to write a letter to your governments in your countries and ask them to support the initiative so that it gains even more momentum. And we may have a positive outcome at the UNEA 5 meeting in February next year. Just now, before I hand over to my colleague Janwin, 2 points of housekeeping. We are recording the first part of the webinar, which is the presentation, but we will not be recording the Q&A session. And then if you want to raise a question in the Q&A session, you can do this via the chat. The chat will be read by us continuously, and then the question will be passed on to Miriam, who will be leading the discussion. Or you can also raise your hand in Zoom, via Zoom, and we will also watch the list of participants for their hands raised. Good. And with this, I would like to hand over to Janwin for the background presentation. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Martin, for the handy introduction. And also, yeah, good day, everyone. It's also my pleasure to present. So before going to the details, also just would like to again highlight that we're currently facing triple global environmental crisis, climate change, and biodiversity loss, and chemical pollution. And the chemical pollution is causing a lot of the harm to the society. Every year, over 1.2 million premature deaths are caused by lead exposure and occupational exposure to 12 chemicals or groups of chemicals alone. And also still we are facing over 300 million cases of intentional acute pesticide poisoning every year. And also it gives a lot of also societal burden in terms of the health care costs and other societal costs. Like in the EU, exposure to PFAS and endocrine disrupting chemicals would cost over 150 billion euro each year. And also very similar attitude, the very similar numbers can be found in other parts of the world. And also here's a figure probably you know very well: if we don't manage plastics in an efficient and effective manner, and then by 2050, we will have more plastics than fish in the ocean. And the time trends of concern, based on the numbers reported in the Global Chemicals Outlook, we kind of illustrates how the chemical industry has grown in the past decades. And then we basically see the linear increase of many industrial chemicals, pesticides, and also the consumption of antibiotics. So we really need to take really rapid actions to address the global threat of chemical pollution. In order to do so, there have been quite some process over the past years. And at the last UNEA 4 in 2019, so the African countries and Switzerland proposed a resolution, and which was later on agreed by all environment ministers around the world. They do emphasize that it is really important, the importance of strengthening the science policy interface and global evidence base for chemicals. They also stressing the urgent need to strengthen the science policy interface at all levels to support and promote science-based, local, national, regional, and global action on the sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020. And also UNEA 4 has mandated a couple of reports. One of them is like assessments of options for strengthening the science policy interface. And the other is to holistically look at the global issues with climate, biodiversity, and pollution, so which is called making peace with nature. So basically, all the reports set the background that we really need to strengthen the science policy interface, and then there's also within the IPCP. We have been also looking into these issues in the past couple of years. Mostly, like we did quite some technical work in terms of understanding the gaps and what are the needs of this science policy interface in international chemicals and waste governance. So we organized the multi-stakeholder workshop in December 2018, really to understand the different stakeholders, regulators, industries, civil society's perspective. And also based on this just multi-stakeholder consultation and also our technical desk review work, we developed this a mapping and gap analysis, understanding the different existing science policy bodies in the sphere, and also what are the gaps. So both reports are available on the IPCP website. And then building on this work, early this year, we published an article in Science laying out what are the major gaps and also what are our current vision to address these issues. So we identified 4 major gaps in the current science policy interface. First is a lack of coverage. So there have been a lot of the science policy interface bodies established, particularly under the different conventions and also by the intergovernmental organizations. Like these are the green or the blue dots. However, these bodies have very specific mandates, so they only cover very specific issues. Therefore, there remain many chemicals and waste issues not covered by any science policy interface bodies in the international level. The second is that most of these existing science policy interface bodies receive mandates from the policymakers, and then they conduct a specific assessment. They do not regularly horizontal scan of chemicals on the global market or what scientific information has been generated by scientists and provide early warnings to policymakers of new and emerging issues. Along the same lines, that this third gap is that there's a lack of bidirectional communication. So most of the information flow is from scientists to policymakers, and scientists are mostly not aware of, informed about policy development. So there's a lot of lost opportunities for conducting timely research to support the policy development. And then the fourth gap is that there's a lack of engagement of the wide scientific community. This, in comparison to the scientists that are currently engaged, there are many more need to be engaged in terms of their disciplines, from the social science, legal experts, or from different parts of the world. And also the gender balance is a key factor here. And then based on this understanding of the landscape, we have proposed the vision is that we do need an overarching science policy body akin to IPCC and EBS on chemicals and waste. So this body is to facilitate the bidirectional communication between scientists and the policymakers, and and cover, like, as an overarching bodies would cover all the issues that are currently not covered by any existing science policy bodies. We have also identified a couple of key core characteristics that such a body should have. First, it needs to be intergovernmental, so as to ensure its policy saliency, and also the government buy-in of its outcomes. And the stakeholders can be observers and provide inputs. This has worked very well in the IPCC and EBS, so we can also learn from them. Second is that this body needs to be objective, independent, and transparent, with clearly defined rules and procedures, including a strict conflict of interest policy. It needs to be representative and inclusive of disciplines, gender, and regions, and actively communicates with policymakers, scientists, and the public. So after we published the science paper, we have also conducted a sign-on campaign, and many thanks to thanks to many of you who have signed this campaign. So today it has been supported. It is supported from received over 1,850 scientists and practitioners from over 80 countries. We also again really encourage you to spread the news, so that's we will also try inform the policymakers at UNEA 5 about this process, and really know about that the scientific community is really behind this idea. So the UNEA 5.2 will take place in February next year, and we are very happy that the scientists' voice have been heard. So there have been a draft resolution for a science policy panel to support action on chemicals, waste, and pollution, submitted by Costa Rica, Ghana, Mali, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and Uruguay to the UNEA 5.2. It submitted last week, and I highlighted some key components of the draft resolution. First is that agrees that a science policy panel should be established to support action on chemicals and waste and pollution, and agrees that the principal functions of the panel should be to undertake horizon scanning and identify issues of concern, to undertake assessments on the requests of policymakers, and to communicate and conduct outreach. And importantly, the draft resolution highlights that agrees that the panel should be an autonomous intergovernmental body, and will decide to establish an ad hoc OEWG, the open-ended working group, to really negotiate and set all the details of this body. Currently, the draft resolution has been made online, and new co-sponsors are still very welcome to join. And I think also here's the contact information from the Swiss government. They're also very much looking forward to working with other countries to really gain more support. And then what will happen from now to what will happen at the UNEA 5.2 is that the countries will gather in Nairobi, and this is kind of a photo from their past negotiations. The countries will stay in one room, possibly without food and without sleep, to discuss the draft resolution text on the screen until they can reach unanimous agreement on the resolution. So it is very also key to receive support from all countries at UNEA 5.2 in order to really facilitate the adoption of the draft resolution. So we have about like 2 more months, and currently now it is really the time that countries are forming their positions for UNEA 5.2. So normally, like in such a negotiations, countries always like come with existing positions to the UNEA 5.2, and it's not always easy for them to change their positions since they're far away from their capital. So actually, it is really the time to give them the support, give them the signals that the scientific community is really supporting these initiatives. So it is actually, it's also the reason why we're convening this workshop. Really, like, need your support to one activity is to really write to your Minister of Environment, Minister of Health, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, really to tell them that they should support such an initiative now, like as a co-sponsor now, or at the UNEA 5.2 negotiation, really to support it. And also send a letter to influential policymakers. And also would like to ask you to please share your letter with colleagues, or like to work together with your colleagues to write such a letter to the policymakers. Since the holiday season is coming very soon, we would also really recommend you to send this letter right after the holiday season. So thanks to Miriam for preparing like a model letter, which has already been put on the IPCP website, and also with a link here. Yeah, I think probably also Anna can help to put the link into the chat. So the idea is that to write a very brief letter to inform the minister about these negotiations as going to take place, and also to explain to them why they should support. So yeah, we would suggest that it will be like, it's about 1 page, right? Yeah, when you click the model letter, you can see that there's some paragraphs on the background why we need to take like urgent global action on chemicals, and also why we need such a science policy body and some of the key considerations, and then really to urge or like whatever language is culturally appropriate to ask for their support of the draft resolution, and also support at UNEA for the negotiation. And also the last but not least is to ask them to really come back to you in informing you about their decisions. So we also highlight many parts of like the parts in the model letter that you should kind of adjust for your own needs. So finally, I think it's your turn. Like, we hope after this workshop, you will take the time really to draft such a letter and send it to your ministers and important policymakers. And please do let us know if you sent a letter, so that we can also highlight that on the IPCP website in terms of which countries have already been covered, which countries are still need more letters. And we have prepared the draft, this model letter in English, and sometimes I think you are from many different parts of the world with different languages. So please feel free to share your language, your letter in your own language. So with us, and then we can post it on the IPCP website for us scientists and practitioners in your regions to send the letter to the ministers. I think it's always the more and the merrier. And yeah, so thank you so much. Here's a very brief background about what has happened past and what we need to do in order to support the UNEA process. Again, just want to highlight that please sign on our support campaign. Please send a letter to your minister and let us know. And also please encourage your colleagues to participate. So we will post everything on the IPCP website. It's a very long link, but I think Anna has already put it into the chat. Thank you so much for joining, and any questions and the feedback is most welcome. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Jean-Yun. That was very clear. You gave a very good outline of the history and where we are to this point. So we're very pleased to start taking your questions, and I see that a number of questions have come in.